Hello and welcome to the Car Podcast, Chris Harris and his friends. Those friends are Neil Clifford, Chris Cooper and Manish Pandey. Manish is in Ibiza drinking rosé. I'm at the luxurious Sofitel T5. Neil's in his garden. Chris Cooper, because he's the only adult among us, is at his desk working. So this is episode number 44. So we dedicate this to the fact that Lewis had really quite a quiet race yesterday, but we'll talk about that later on. But Ferrari seemed to have found a little bit of pace, but still not enough pace because the McLarens disappeared. But I've got to do that later on. The first subject on our agenda today is Lotus. And Lotus appears to be in a pickle again. I'm only 50 years old, and I'm not sure Lotus has ever not been in a pickle, as far as I can remember, which is a great shame because we love it so much. So, Neil Clifford, you start us off with Lotus and how you feel about Lotus and the situation it might find itself in.
It's all very unsurprising and depressing, isn't it? And I suppose there's not a lot of positivity you can say about the current situation because these disasters, these situations, two or three bad things always happen at once over a period of time for there to be a real proper drama, don't there? And, you know, the move to electric cars, probably the cost of electricity for factories in the UK, Trump, the focus on developing Lotus as a brand so far out of its comfort zone and its DNA in itself strategically is a tough one. You add all those things up and it's depressing. And I feel just incredibly sad about a brand that we all love, but we haven't bought enough of. You know, I drive around in an Alpine 110, and here I am saying how I love Lotus. It's a bit bloody contradictory, isn't it? Because you wish the Alpine 110 was a bloody Lotus. I'd much rather have a Lotus badge on it than a French badge. Not to say I'm against French people or French cars, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There should have been a Lotus. And this sort of, on one side, it's a tricky situation for every car manufacturer. I don't think any CEO of any car company is sleeping that well at night. And if you reverse that into an underinvested, subscale brand that was at its coolest in about, well, one can argue it's 65 with the Elan or 83 with the Spree or whatever. You know, it's a long, long time ago, isn't it? It's like saying, isn't it really sad that people aren't, the Beatles aren't number one? You know, it's a bit tricky. So I feel very unoptimistic about the situation, to be honest, because you walk into that showroom in Piccadilly, and all you go and look at the lovely whatever Formula One car. I'm not up on my Lotuses. Managers will be to tell me what it is.
It's a 1990.
Yeah, you go and look at that, and then you look at these sort of bars of soap that are positioned around the showroom that are indescribably bland. Really, I'm sure technically, because there's some incredibly hundreds of super talented, dedicated, beautiful people in that factory. I worry about the situation desperately, and then the next day you read that maybe the government is going to bail them out, and that's another sort of whole conversation, isn't it? Because that's governments don't have any money; it's our money.
Yeah.
So it's right. So it's tricky. I think I always thought the shoe industry was quite tough, but currently the car industry is probably the hardest job to do is manage an automotive brand at the moment. And it was not rescued at the time. Looking back, wouldn't it have been lovely if BMW would have bought Lotus 20 or 30 years ago and invested and have a strategy to look after this incredibly unique brand in many respects. And we all want light, nimble little cars now, and Lotus in some respects would have been perfectly positioned for the future, but there's been a few missteps on the way. So I'm incredibly worried and sad about the situation, really. I don't see it ending that well, although I do hope it does, as long as we as taxpayers don't have to pay for it all.
Yeah, I think there was a news story that was speculative in the FT, wasn't there, last week, saying that there were rumours that that the factory might be closing and production had been stopped for a while anyway. Then there was an updated news story, I think 2 days ago, saying, look,
Yeah.
the government stepped in, but we don't know to what extent it stepped in. And I think we can be fairly sure that whatever offer they would table probably wouldn't be sufficient. And also they'd probably impose conditions around, only making EVs, that sports car production probably have to end. When do politicians ever intervene in the production of cars and it not end up being a bit tricky? So,
a little bit of me dies, which is a ridiculous thing to say. But when I see an MG on the road, I shiver. And I shouldn't really, should I? Because maybe the MG thing is good that it's been rescued to some degree, but
it hasn't.
it hasn't really, has it? I just wish my Alpine 110 was a bloody Lotus.
But they've had their chance to sort of renew themselves so many times, but it just feels like they're sort of out of luck, and there's no longer a marketplace for their cars. People either want a big brand. If they're going to spend the money that Lotus needs to charge to make a profit on a car, they want a recognisable brand. And sadly, Lotus has been in the doldrums for so long that I don't think people really, unless you're like us, they don't view that brand as being worthy of the sticker price they need. I feel sorry for them with the fact the market's moved away from them. But equally, I thought the Emira was a good car. I really enjoyed it when I drove it. But again, if I'd ask myself the toughest question of all, would I rather buy this or a used 911? You're probably going to buy a used 911.
Cayman.
Or an
A10.
Well, actually,
Cayman.
the thing about the Alpine story, which is very interesting, is that the Alpine was as commercially unsuccessful as all the Lotuses to start with. But because the parent company had the balls and frankly the money to hang in there, they've made it work. Also, its proposition is a bit more sincere in that it's it has that Toyota engine I've always struggled with the Toyota engines in those Lotuses. They just let the thing down massively.
Yeah.
And it just feels like the same engine with the same slightly ropey cable gear shift, and they make the same noises. And they've never really done it for me at all. I mean, the chassis are beyond peer really on UK roads. They're better than the Alpine, but it's tough. Anyhow, sorry. What do you think, Chris Cooper?
I kind of feel I should have been on going up the A11 this afternoon. It is the A11, isn't it? Up past Thetford and Snetterton to Wyndham and then bang a right. But this is not an emergency podcast. I feel slightly more positive. I'm just going to put a slightly more positive spin. So
good.
The Alpine comparison is the right one. I was thinking this afternoon, why wasn't the A110 a Lotus when the Emira we know was the development of the Evora? I mean, I remember, Chris, you and I were at that track in Germany I'm never allowed to mention again, and we met some of the Lotus engineers who were developing the car. And they were very excited about it, and we were excited for them. And then we saw it with, oh God, that just really looks shit. Just what is it? And the Emira is caught between a 911 and something smaller, like an Alpine. Famously, the Alpine was originally intended as a joint venture between Caterham and Renault. And I think when the then owner of Caterham, Tony Fernandez, the guy who briefly owned a Formula One team, an airline, and part of QPR with Flavio and Bernie, presumably. QPR is a football club in West London, Leicestershire, for those who don't. Queen's Park Rangers. I used to work, Chris.
Yes.
Just off the A40. Lotus is owned by Geely. Geely is a big and well-funded and not totally shit owner of other car companies. They haven't cocked up everything they've done. the Alpine story is interesting because they've got a very similar challenge, because they had a range of classic and older 60s, 70s cars, which everybody loved. There was somebody who was here at the farm last week talking about something I'll come and mention a bit later on in the pod. And he saw my Alpine outside the office and he said, kind of prefer the older ones. I said, yeah, but at least they're still here. And so Alpine had that old car image and reputation, and they produced the A110. And that was always going to be, there was a plan. They knew that there weren't going to be lots of different petrol A110s. They had to go electric. And now they've launched the little Renault 5 lookalike thing, and there's something else. There's a new A110, whatever it's going to be, electric one, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of wish there was more variety, a bit more internal combustion there, but it's not dead. That's what we should hope for Lotus. I suspect the stories in the press, if this was an emergency podcast, and I disappeared up the A11 at untold speed this afternoon to stand outside Factory Gate, I suspect I would have had a lot more people to talk to who were worried about what's going on, because I suspect these things don't end up in the press unless somebody said something and it's either been leaked or it's just leaked out. I suspect that, and I made this slightly facetious joke when we did have an emergency podcast outside the gates of McLaren, that a yes minister type intervention has occurred, and somebody in Whitehall has said, I don't care how you get out of the press, we are not going to hear about a closure of a factory and 1,200 jobs going. Make it go away in a Malcolm Tucker style rant.
That's how it reads.
Yeah, and I suspect somebody's gone from Whitehall to either to Geely or to Hethel to say, that's not fucking helpful. Have you watched the program called The News? A lot of it is clearly the mayor of Trumpton, his Donaldness, has clearly literally thrown a hand grenade into world trade by saying 25% tariff. So most UK, if not all UK car makers who export to the US, just stop production. There's no point building stuff if we think we're never going to sell them.
Well, let's be truthful. How many of those electric shitters were they really selling in America? I think that for me, yeah, but how many of them were they selling? I bet you if you drive between Santa Monica and Hollywood, you will not see one of those, but you'll be tripping over DBXs and G-Wagons. And I think I agree with you on the custodianship. You know, Geely, I interviewed Lee Shufu, the owner of Geely, in 2009. I don't think many journalists have done that. I think I've lost the tape because I'm that organised. But he clearly knows exactly what he's doing. And I agree with Chris. What they did with Volvo has been exceptional. And they own a sizable chunk of Mercedes-Benz as well that isn't often publicised. But I just don't see. I never got the Lotus thing at all. And the electric, I think we can all deal with the fact that the Lotus Colin Chapman philosophy has to be in some way manipulated for the modern era. You can't. Not everyone can drive around in a car that's 520 kilograms and has crazy suspension specs and stuff like that. That the world's changed. But when they put that badge, I'll rephrase that. When I saw the Lotus showroom in Bristol with that massive SUV electric thing in the corner and then the weird saloon thing, I just thought, why aren't we all being rude? We're not. I should have been rude about it, and I wasn't rude about it because I didn't even give a shit enough to be rude about it. I just ignored them, and I see them driving around near me, and they're so clearly cars that just being given people to drive around in. They're not selling those things.
Apparently they are. I mean, I've talked to people in the trade. And I say, look, honestly, these things can't be selling. There's the big HRO in Empire campus in Hatfield, where they've got their head office, the big Ferrari dealership, a big Bentley dealership. They've got the big Lotus dealership. And I've talked to somebody in the know there to say, those Lotus salesmen, they must be sitting there all day just on Instagram and Tinder or whatever they're doing. So no, they're selling. I guess because they're EVs, they're selling them to company cars. So, I mean, the strategy is, I mean, it's interesting.
What about the hypercar? What about the Evija, the hypercar? I mean, first rule, call it something people can say. That always helps. Good start, I find. I was actually the GT3 video that we published yesterday. We're recording this on a Monday. This will go out on a Friday. When we were recording the sort of detail sections of that, there was a lovely road rally that came past. and there was all sorts of little fun cars, and I was whooping. It wasn't set up; I was whooping with joy. Once they'd gone, Top Gear were filming a Lotus Evija on that road, and it whooshed past me a couple of times, and I just looked at it and thought, "Oh my God, I'd be more excited if I saw a Mark 1 Elise." I just, betting the house on an electric car. What have they spent on that thing? Marcus life at the Nürburgring. Sorry, Manish, you have a go.
No. It was. I mean, there's not much to really add, other than when we were making Lucky, spent a long time looking at all the films we could find that were made about, Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, anything we could. And there's a very instructive old documentary about Colin Chapman, and it was in color, and it was called something like Colin Chapman Millionaire. And you get to see him in his Beechcraft, and you get to see, kind of his little caddish. There was an absolute discomfort about Colin Chapman when he turned what was effectively a small bespoke business that made racing cars and made a few road cars into this production company. And the reporter kept saying, "So what's it like being a millionaire?" And he kept going like that, kind of trying, not trying to rise to it. And I think the point I'm making is that don't we as a nation have to reflect a little bit on what we do and what these brands are and where they're going? Because, I think what you're saying in so many words is, what is the point of a Lotus? Is the Lotus just a badge to put on a Chinese car, which, I hate that word, it has DNA, but that has about 4% of Lotus's DNA. In other words, about as much DNA as anything has if it has four wheels. Or is there a point to our car industry? Because the thing that I read both those Financial Times articles, same journalist, and it just said UK vehicle production is now at its lowest since 1949.
Yeah, 76 years or something.
That's just, we just have to have a little think about, post-war, this is it. This is the nadir. And then it said Lotus was not paying its bills. It has not paid its suppliers, and that caused an immediate problem. And then it talked about all the other problems that Chris and Neil have pointed out, that we've got the Trump tariff, we've got, people not buying these cars, blah, blah, blah. But it's...
Manish, it could be worse.
Go on.
It could be worse. Danny Barha could still be in charge.
And the question is, where did
God
it
Almighty.
No, but honestly, I think that this is the thing. If we ask ourselves the same question, what is the point of Aston Martin? I think the answer's a bit easier, isn't there? There's this Formula One team. It's
James
got
Bond.
the same name, at least. Sorry?
James Bond.
James Bond, yeah, Formula One team, James Bond. They make this road car. Aston Martin made an SUV because they were supposed to be the easy money, weren't they? And Lotus make an SUV because that was supposed to be easy money, wasn't it? But for me, it's a sort of much more existential thing. I thought Colin Chapman, really, you could see, hated going to board meetings. You could see he did not want to go into that factory. I don't think he ever went into that factory, except, frankly, when they shot that film. Because you could just see he didn't know where any of the desks were, what he was doing. He wanted to be basically sitting in a little drawing office, making suspension lighter. And there was another thing. I always felt Colin Chapman didn't particularly like being a big company owner, but I think he quite liked money. I think that was it. So, where are the seeds for the, in a way, I think what I'm saying is, isn't it a miracle that we're talking about Lotus kind of 70 years on? Because
I think,
as a journalist, with my journalist hat on, I've got a copy of Car Magazine from 1984 from my new one that I've bought that I'll be reading on the plane tomorrow. And I bet you in there'll be a story or there'll be an oracle piece about how Lotus is in a bit of a pickle. Because Lotus has always been in a pickle. I think Lotus's primary function has been to give the motoring media quite big stories to chew over, and its secondary purpose has been to make cars. Honestly, for the last, as long as I can remember, Lotus has been in trouble. You had the buyouts, you had Artioli, you had Danny Barha, that mad bastard from Peugeot that everyone hated. You've got so many. Honestly, it's just been it's been one disaster to the other. It's a miracle, and this is where I do sincerely say that I still know a few people there, and they're people that could go to Porsche and make their cars better to drive. They're that talented,
Yes,
right?
I think
Exactly.
that's right.
But they never stood a fecking chance
Yes.
with the way that the business was run. And
Yes.
I'd imagine the value in that business, put aside the badge, is the people, the talent
Yeah, there's IP.
in that
and
business.
yeah.
Yeah. And maybe Geely sort of know that. They're like, why are we making cars in the UK? We've got amazing people.
Yeah.
We can employ those people across all of our marques and platforms.
What tends to happen is that there's a pool of talented people that work across automotive, and whatever the good news, well-funded story is at that time, they all migrate towards that. So JLR have probably still got the deepest pockets. McLaren are going to emerge now suddenly, so everyone that moved from McLaren to JLR will probably go back there in the next year. Lotus is just not in that game.
Can I just add one? It's an old Formula One story, which I think just backs us up. You said 1984. That is actually so on point for this story. When Senna vetoed Derek Warwick as his teammate for 1986 in Lotus, it caused massive consternation. The British press were after him, and like, you bastard, you've just destroyed, because at that point Warwick was rated as highly as our Noige, even higher, even more highly by some people. But Gerald Donaldson, a Canadian journalist, wrote, I thought, just the best piece on it. And it was called Colin Chapman's Haste or Greed. I can't remember. And the point was this: the turbo was the thing to have. Ferrari stuck a turbo in their car. Renault obviously developed this whole technology. Bernie was getting one from BMW. But Colin Chapman was just in too much of a rush to do any kind of manufacturer deal. That's why Frank Williams held on. That's why Ron Dennis held on, because he was going to get these manufacturers to come and pay to be in his cars, not Colin. Colin had to have a turbo. There was one available to buy, and it was the Renault one. And he was paying full fat for it. There was no, he just paid complete retail for this. Senna, when he joined Lotus, was absolutely shocked as to what they had in the cupboard in terms of parts and resources. And that's why, he and DeAngelis very quickly fell out in that first year, because it was sort of, eagles do this thing where they feed their chicks in order. It sounds horribly unfair. So they feed the firstborn one first. Then if there's any mouse left over, they feed the second one and the third one. It's the only way to guarantee one eagle lives. It really is. You can be very egalitarian about it, and then all three chicks die. And it was the same thing. Senna just realized they didn't have the resource. Now, DeAngelis had personally bailed out the Lotus Formula One team on more than one occasion. He was shocked he was treated the way he was by Peter Waugh in the wake of the death of Colin Chapman. But the truth is, even in 1984, going into 85, going into 86, they couldn't afford to run two cars in Formula One because they were paying full money for a customer engine that they could not afford. And I think there is something odd about the DNA of this company. Of course, it's maverick and it's this and that. But can you imagine Frank Williams going, I think I'll build myself a road car to get myself out of kind of, this difficult formula. Not many people can do a Ferrari. Not many people can do that. Ron has got close to it, and we're going to hopefully see the next chapter of the McLaren road car. But it's a tricky thing to do, and there is something about this company. It's been chaotic and short of cash and barking, kind of beyond its breast size ever since I can remember. I mean, it really, chest size, whatever.
I have to say, I'm happy to be harsh, but I am really, really sad. I've said on this podcast before that you never forget the first time you go to Ferrari as a journalist. It's special. But actually, I'd never owned a Ferrari, and I wasn't really that much of a Ferrari fan before I was a journalist. My two favourite brands were Porsche and Lotus. And the first time I went to Werk 1 in Zuffenhausen was mega. But hand on heart, going to Lotus to Hethel was more meaningful, and going to the track and piecing together the photographs I'd seen of cars being driven around there and what the corner was and just how lunatic their test drivers were to put them in the angles they did in the places they did was amazing. And the names, Becker, Kershaw, McQueen, all these people that I just, they were my heroes. And then you got to know them a bit. It makes me immensely, immensely sad, but I don't see a positive way out of it. I'm sorry. I just don't. before we move on to the next point on our agenda, I'd like to show you the depth of thought that goes into this podcast. I'm just looking at my notes here. I was trying to come up with something witty for us to play in the next few weeks. It didn't work, but I'll get there. But this one was, and this is the stillable one: viaduct or whiskey. But I thought to myself, obviously, I had a couple of scoops myself when I started writing these down. And I've got 4 here that I thought would baffle us all. But then I thought, viaducts don't have much to do with cars. And I'm not sure Maloney colleagues drink much whiskey. So it might fall flat. But I'm working on it. Okay. It's work in progress.
I think you should bring that to the podcast.
Okay.
Yes,
Cheese or service station will never be beaten. But I'll give it a go. Viaduct or whiskey. So here we're moving on to something that I think all of us will agree is a point of absolute joy and one of the greatest things that the UK has ever introduced to the world, the roundabout. I'm talking about the roundabout. The roundabout that links roads, the roundabout that creates rhythm, the roundabout that allows you to go a bit faster, to explore the limits of your car, the roundabout. So let's talk about in appreciating the roundabout and also tell me your favourite roundabout. Chris Cooper.
Do you know why we love roundabouts?
Go on.
It's because that's where we learned to skid. It's as simple as that. Anybody who's said they didn't think about skidding or didn't actually skid is fibbing. That's where we did. I remember my very first car, my Mini Cooper, which is as old as I was, front wheel drive. You think, how much fun is that? It had silly sort of extra big wheels and tires. The whole thing was a bag of shit. And it was a bit stiff. It had that sort of hydromatic suspension, which had sort of seized. So it had no give in it. And just think about turning it in and just a little bit quickly, and then it would just go and it would do, and it would just, and then you get in a rear wheel drive car and it's a bit damp and you think, you literally look around like that. You think, I've got mirrors, but I'm going to look around. You feel that furtive and that sort of naughty to think, it's quite early in the morning. You would go out early in the morning to do this. Late at night you can't because there's always somebody on the road and they're going to be drunk or whatever. Early in the morning. I remember driving down the A27 between Portsmouth and Chichester when I was at university, was at Poly. And there's some fantastic roundabouts. So just a little bit of a flick. So
that's the old A27 to Funtington.
Exactly, to Funtington. You go past all the Roman stuff and whatever.
Yeah.
So I think roundabouts, we love them because every time you go around one, you think about, I learned to skid on one just like so. The ones that we liked when we were younger, they would have been quite long, so quite sort of big diameter, but with very few junctions on them. And certainly nowhere for the Rozzers to sit watching you do your sort of shit skids. There was one, when I first had my Renault 5 GT Turbo, there was one that the Bromley junction on the eastern side of the M25. You come northbound, from the north on the M25, there's basically one junction, which is sort of...
Yeah, it's a big one, I know that.
It's sort of at 3 o'clock. You join us at 6 o'clock, go all around the clock. So it's like 270 degrees.
Corner.
And it's where you learn, you could put load into the car and think, sort of almost, I would call it, I remember my girlfriend at the time saying, you've got to realize, to people like us, this is a laboratory experiment. We're doing important work. We're building up slowly, and we would go round and round and round low until the bloody left front wheel was just howling with heat and shit and stuff. And just feeling that point where you think, it's just on that little balancing and just how close to the point can I go?
That's at Swanley.
And yeah, that one. And just that little...
Yeah, I know it.
That little... You get right to the point of that bit where you think, can I go a bit further? Roundabouts like that. Roundabouts, modern time though, I've got a little gripe to add to my love letter to the roundabout. What the fuck is it with those boards, those blinds that are now fitted?
Oh, yes.
On the approach to roundabouts. So you have to stop to look at the road. You could have otherwise have seen perfectly well by judging it, because one of the acts of the art of driving, and our love of the art of driving, is you're coming up to a roundabout, don't brake. I mean, yes, brake if you have to, obviously, but how do you judge it? Think, I do this on the A33, the 1 or 2 on the A33, you can see, I can judge the cars, and I can see that there's a junction there, cars coming in, there's one over there, and you think, I'm just going to coast up to it, take a gear down, maybe a little bit of engine braking, and without sort of, I've got to stop, or I've got to speed up. You judge your entry, even sometimes to quite small gaps, because you've matched your speed, and fellow road users can say he's one of us. So roundabouts are just the best thing.
And also, when they're blocking the vision deliberately, the whole point of the roundabout is to keep traffic moving.
Exactly.
So why make it? I mean, that's just where we're at politically these days. But yes, they are. Roundabouts are wonderful, and of course, let's not forget that what makes roundabouts great is that quite often those that know will go a different way so they can take in a favourite roundabout. Even if you know it's not the best way to go,
yes,
you might go that way for that roundabout. Neil Clifford, how do you feel about roundabouts?
I think shit skids. Did you actually say that?
I did say shit skids, yeah.
You did say shit skids.
I did say skidding shit.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll put that to one side. I don't really do the skid thing, and I'm now feeling very sort of insecure and incapable, because I should probably at least. I'm a bit old maybe I did in my Mark 1 Ford Escort. Maybe I did, but I still need tuition on the non-shit skid. But you know what my favourite roundabout is? And I'm going there on Thursday. I'm going to Classic Le Mans.
Yeah.
And there's a million roundabouts actually on the road down from Alençon. You see the little signs, but actually it's not an impressive roundabout. It's not a driving round and enjoying the car roundabout. It's a tiny little roundabout in the town of Arnage. And it's where everyone sits, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You sit there with your omelette and chips, your beer if you're a passenger, and your Diet Coke if you're not, and it's rammed full of people. I'm sure if you put it in YouTube, I've never really done this, but you put it in YouTube, the burnouts that go on there, and the hilarity, and frankly, just the cars you see, and the male automotive zoo that descends on that little roundabout. It's not quite the same at Classic Le Mans. You know, it's a bit more old farty. It's a bit posher. It's not so busy. It's not so sweaty. You don't have to queue for 3 hours for the toilet in the little cafe, and then, you know, almost do what you need to do with your eyes closed, because it's not as pretty as you need it to be in there. I mean, the shit skids have come back. That is my favourite little roundabout, because you can sit there for hours. The Granada 2.8 Gear X estates turning up, and the Capris, and a million TVRs, and a million Caterhams, obviously, and a few Lotus. That's my favourite roundabout, and I can't wait for that little 4:30 alarm call on Thursday, and I've got to meet my mates at Flexi Plus at 7:30, and I'll be there at about 6:55. And actually, because we wanted to stay in a posh hotel and we couldn't really find one, we're staying about an hour and a half south of Le Mans. So it's been termed on our WhatsApp group Classic Le Mans Provence trip. We're almost in Marseille, I think. But anyway, it doesn't bloody matter, does it?
Mega.
We're just gonna have blokey time, loads of Haribo, loads of silly chat about cars, loads of little espressos, a couple of glasses of rosé in the garden on Thursday night. Jump in the pool because you paid for it. There's a pool, you got to jump in it, haven't you? Because you got to at least, you know, get in the pool once. Little dinner in the old town, and think about that roundabout.
You're right.
That's me.
YouTube is our friend here. If you Google Arnage burnouts, you get two things.
Yeah.
You get loads of crazy guys doing burnouts at Arnage, and loads of crazy people doing burnouts in their Bentley Arnages.
Yeah.
Do you know? Also, if you Googled it, if it did exist, the person that's coming to our live event on the 25th of July, which we're very excited about in Clapham, is John McGuinness, who will obviously be uncontrollable, and I apologise in advance for what he says. But John McGuinness has a Bentley Arnage in which he did a rolling burnout and shat the diff out the back of it, because
What?
only McGuinness would do that in a Bentley, wouldn't he? There you
Yeah.
go. So there you go. Burnout, Arnage, McGuinness. So, but there's still tickets available, and McGuinness is going to be there. So 25th of July. Roundabouts. I think they're I think with the Cat's Eye and HP Source, a few other things, one of the greatest gifts we've given the world. All you need to do is go to America and drive through a gridded sort of suburban area, and the number of times you have to stop and then go through the heavily crowned bit where they drain, and then turn right on red is a great thing, but the roundabout's greater still. I also think they just add interest to a journey. There's something else you have to adapt to. This is a very post-war British thing. I think when in that period when our country was run by really clever people that had just won a war, the roundabout is impish. The roundabout it's practical, but there's a nod to those that know that you can contort this thing to be more pleasurable, to make your journey more fun.
Yes.
And I love that about them. So they're not always perfect. I got lost in Swindon 10 days ago, and I ended up at the Magic Roundabout, or whatever it is, 6 or 8 minis together. I once took an American friend there because he said to me, take me to the most ridiculously British thing you could think of. So I took him to the Magic Roundabout in Swindon.
Swindon's a good start.
Yeah, and he ignored Swindon. We got out and looked at it, and he went, "Well, what's that? Why would you do that?" And I said, "None of us know either. If you find anyone with the answer, please tell us." And I think, and they come in so many shapes and forms, and there's no way you can't teach if you've got a kid who's learning to drive, and I'm sure Manish has, and Chris has been through it, and Neil's still in that process, and I've got one coming as well. It's very interesting. Quite often the kid will go, "How do you do roundabouts?" And the honest answer is they're not the same. There's no way of doing roundabouts. You have to adapt to each roundabout as it comes. So I absolutely adore them. I really do. And yes, they're a place where one might have learnt how to make the back axle travel faster than the front axle. I have, yes, for the record, been blue lighted on a roundabout. And
have you?
Yes, I was blue lighted because I was, let's say, quite sideways. It was wet, and I was quite sideways, and I came past the junction, and the car was clearly sliding. So as the blue lights came on and pulled me over, and I had a very reasonable conversation with the gentleman, and I just said that I was, I quote, correcting a slide. And he was absolutely fine. He said, "Powerful car, it's wet, you've overstepped the mark, and you've gathered the car up." And I said, that's what I was doing. So I'm not going to encourage out and out yobbery, but when you couldn't afford a test track, that's probably where you learned. Favorite roundabout? Like saying favorite child or favorite car. For me, there's one that every time I come up to it from a particular direction, I just go, "This is fantastic." And it is M5 South to go M50 South into Wales. So you come off just beyond Strensham Services, and you have a long downhill slip road. And then you've only got one off ramp and one on ramp before you're going off to the M50, and it's fast.
It's very, very fast,
and it's just a joy. And if you get it right and you carry momentum, you can be in something really little with not much power, and you can really aggravate the big boys, which is again a great place. Roundabouts were the place where, when you had no power, you'd make your advantage, weren't they?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
You'd be praying, "Oh, I hope there's a roundabout coming up because I can brake a bit later and I'll carry a bit more speed and I'll get a bit closer to the central island."
In a Lotus.
Exactly. Roundabouts were made for low time.
They're Lotuses.
That's like
Exactly.
Roundabouts.
No, it's really funny because the first point I put on mine, it's literally the first thing you said. My biggest appreciation of roundabouts comes from driving in America. And as a teenager, four-way stops were particularly annoying. I can see, you've got to have two very busy roads crossing each other. traffic lights, with the right turn. But if you've got these little small roads with a four-way stop sign, it just causes so much confusion. There's no after you, sir, in the US. The other thing is you roll onto those, which I found very annoying. But the flip side, I was going to say, was, has anyone been to the Place de Charles de Gaulle roundabout in Paris? That is possibly the scariest roundabout on God's earth.
I would have driven it.
Side.
Yeah. You don't mean Arc de Triomphe. You mean the one?
Yeah, exactly. And you've just got literally 27,000 lanes of traffic. Well, I think it's 7 roads that are converging, and the priorities to people coming on. In that very, very peculiar. So you're going the wrong way. You're merging completely in an alien fashion. And when you're on the roundabout, the whole idea is to let people on. I mean, it's kind of, you talked about kind of the impish genius of British engineers after the Second World War. There is something very contra and French about that. Look at what the British are doing. We can fuck them up every time they come to Paris. Just watch.
You've got to take confidence.
Yeah. It's also partly cobbles. So in the wet, that one is lively.
It's it's a very, very scary place to be, even in a taxi. But I have to tell you, my favorite roundabout. It was in the. I think I did this in the 90s. Was Milton Keynes? If you go down the Watling Road.
Milton Keynes, there's some great roundabouts.
Just go down the Watling Road early in the morning, and Milton, I've done this, okay, and it's just roundabout on basically an arcing road. It is so enjoyable. You're just going in a straight line, but my God, you do enjoy yourself on that road. So Watling Road, all of those roundabouts, all 400 of them. One after another.
Roundabouts, we love them. There you go. Finley, that's a T-shirt. I want a T-shirt that says roundabouts we love them.
Yeah.
So I've just had a slight nightmare on my messaging service because the gentleman that I bought my Alpine 7618R head unit off has just messaged me just saying he's selling his very rare Alpine 7619, which I didn't even know existed until 3 weeks ago.
One of one.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Alpine head units they're my new problem. So, moving on. Where's my agenda? Who knows what the next thing on the agenda is?
It's the important topic
Probably
of
F1.
Oh, that. Now, I asked this one because sometimes I should probably draw a distinction between topics for the podcast and things I should ask my clever mate Chris Cooper over phone calls so he can educate me.
Yeah.
This is one of this could be blurring the lines because normally I'd phone him and go, Chris, I'm stupid, explain this to me.
Yes.
So I'm going to start by saying, Chris, I'm stupid, explain this to me.
Yes.
That
explain why you're stupid.
Pickups in the UK. So in the UK, there was you could buy a twin cab pickup with a certain payload, and you got the VAT off it. But that's been changed, and I think it slightly alters the complexion potentially of the UK road network.
You're on the right road, but it's slightly different. So. Prior to April this year, that's the tax year in the UK, if you had a vehicle that was regarded as a commercial vehicle, i.e. had a payload of more than 1,000 kilos, even though it had 2 cab bits, a double cab, so it was a hybrid of a commercial vehicle and a car, it had 4 seats, 5 seats in it. If it had a payload of more than 1,000 kilos, it benefited from 2 crucial tax advantages over a car. One was benefit in kind tax. It was treated like a commercial vehicle rather than a private car. So if you were even a basic rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer, that gave you significant advantages. Could have more than halved your tax bill if you got out and bought just an estate car, say. But the biggest issue and the biggest advantage you had was capital allowances. I know we've all lain awake at night worrying about capital allowances. In plain English, that basically means if you buy it for your business prior to April this year, you could write the whole value off against corporation tax in that year. In the budget, or in April 25 this year, both of those things changed negatively. So benefit in kind for company car users it was abolished, so it was just treated like a normal company car. But the biggest thing is capital allowances were effectively removed. So they are now all treated for both benefit in kind if you're an employee of a business or your own business, and capital allowances, they're now twin cabs are now treated as ordinary cars. Most people nobody uses a twin cab really if they're not using it for business purposes, etc., etc. Very few people would go into because they're not quite as nice a drive as an estate car, blah, blah, blah. So it's caused a huge fuss for people who work, self-employed, small businesses, rural communities, agriculture, builders, tradespeople, whatever. They're all up in arms because those two things have changed. The VAT is the same, actually. There's no difference to VAT treatment. It is about benefit and kind of capital allowances, but it's basically meant that if you're in the business of using a Ford Ranger or an Isuzu or whatever it is, it's now got massively more expensive. In your business of selling those things, you're a bit stuffed. It's shit.
Do you think it's a spiteful move, or do you think it's they've closed off a loophole that needed to be closed off?
I don't think. I mean, personally, it's just my opinion. It wasn't a loophole that should have been closed off somehow to level up and make the world fairer. I suspect it was seen as a low-hanging fruit if you're in the Treasury trying to find more tax, because in the UK you need to find more tax. And personally, living in the countryside, talking to people who come to the farm and all over the down in Cornwall, it's seen as a metropolitan challenge to the misunderstood countryside. But we'll leave Mr. Clarkson to fill in that argument.
That's a very succinct, clever summary. Neil Clifford, from your perspective, you're probably a bit like me. I just see loads of these things about, and they seem to be people seem to be quite happy in them, and I quite like the fact that they're not X5s or AMG G-Wagons and stuff. There's an honesty about them. What do you think about them? Or do you think there are too many of these bloody things and they're being used?
I didn't know there was any tax benefits linked to these cars. So I'm learning. Every day's a school day when you're friends with Chris Cooper. But what I would say, in this part of the world, which is not dissimilar to Chris's part of the world, the only people that I see driving these are semi-retired people with dogs in the back. So clearly that could be very wrong, because maybe there isn't a loophole. Well, I'm also annoyed that I haven't got one, because I've always the Mercedes. What's that? The X.
Yeah, that's been and gone. That was a shit.
I know.
Shit box.
Was it shit? That's probably why I didn't buy
one.
But I always thought
basically a Nissan with a Mercedes badge on it, and it was very expensive and not very Mercedes-like.
I've always fancied one. You look at that Grenadier again, don't you, and go, oh, but then you look at the front and go, oh.
Yeah, see, the Grenadier was a complete cock-up. They did a double cab.
Yes.
But that only had a payload of something reasonably under 1,000 kilograms. So there were so for business users, there were no advantage of using it. I mean, if you were...
Was it a non-starter then?
Honestly, what the fuck?
Yes.
The semi-retired, there's on the face of it, there is no tax advantage to a semi-retired. I'm not a tax advisor. If you want tax advice, go and talk to a professional. But my instinct is, if you were a semi-retired dog walker, it's not obvious to me where either the benefit in kind or capital allowances provisions would have given you any tax advantage.
That's true. Maybe
you might
it's just
have
more
liked the idea of it. That's fine.
I just do quite like the idea.
Yeah, that's fine. I do as
but
well.
Clearly, I don't like the idea of it enough. Like Lotus, because I don't own either.
Yeah.
Sadly,
I think one of the reasons they became for commercial users was when there were just single cabs, like the Toyotas and Nissans and whatever. You'd end up sort of having to have two vehicles. Somebody to carry family in and your work vehicle. The double cab suddenly meant I could get with one vehicle. I don't have to have two.
That's true. So which is better for the environment.
It's better.
No, the irony of this is actually it's doing exactly what the government shouldn't be doing. If they are absolutely pledged, I think Neil's has established, you've all established there is no tax advantage in buying one of these things if you're just a private person. So you just buy it. It's exactly the same as buying your Granada. But if you are somebody who has a proper commercial reason to have one, a plumber, a builder, someone in the countryside. But actually, that double cab means that you can take on the weekends your dog, your wife, your child, right? Somebody's gone.
Chuck your wife in the back.
But you know what I mean? Somebody's just gone, right, tax him.
Is that why you're sitting in the garden, Neil, this evening? Did you crack that joke to Emma earlier?
Yes, probably.
And
I never quite know what I say until afterwards.
No, but do you think somebody is people are going to turn around and now go, right, sod that, I'm going to buy a single cab truck and another car, because there may well be a tax advantage.
You may have to.
Probably not. That. No.
Buy yourself a second-hand car for the family.
Also, is this going to be like the market for light aircraft in America in the mid-90s, when there had been no new ones built in 20 years because the industry died? Because I mean, how many new? I feel really sorry for people trying to sell these things. It must be tough. Isuzu, whatever their sales, must be down, but that means the used values are going to stay very, very high, doesn't it, for a while?
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
There you go, piece of education. And I have to say, it just does feel a bit spiteful. And I think the summary that the old Metropolitan elite has gone, we're going to deny you this. Yeah, it does feel like there's a bit of that going on.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Formula One for the weekend. Now, I did something I've never done before. I sat with my youngest, and we watched the Grand Prix a lot. But because I'm a bit chaotic and I things sort of go wrong over time with me. For the last few weeks, I've watched the Grand Prix 4 weeks on my phone. I watch it on my phone, and I watch it with my youngest. So we sit and we watch it on an iPhone, the small iPhone as well, because I don't know how to make it work on my television because I haven't got a Skybox. And I used to watch it on my iPad. I had a big 15-inch iPad, but I lost the iPad. I left it in a hotel. We're not quite sure where it is. So the only device I've got Sky on is my phone. So I sat there and I said to my youngest, I said, Herb, we're going to buy that one-off thing so we can watch it on the big telly box. So I'm going to treat you today. It was 14 quid for a pass to watch it. But I had a funny feeling that the race might give us something. And from the very start, when dear old Carlos's car didn't work, it was an interesting race. And I those opening exchanges, as you might call them, were as good as you'll ever see racing drivers. It was absolutely mesmerising. So, Manish, how do you feel about the race?
Well, I feel that my sort of long-term prediction about overall, if you like, the climate this season would be McLaren is becoming more and more sort of indicated by the race. We get a huge amount of, if you like, seasonal variation. I mean, George Russell did a fantastic job last Grand Prix and won it. This race, he was bloody lucky to finish fifth. Now, I know you've said in the introduction to this podcast, didn't Ferrari do really well? I don't agree they did at all. They were 30 seconds off McLaren's pace. Now, you might say that this was an exceptional race for McLaren, but I think Ferrari did what they did because Mercedes didn't perform. I think that's what it was about, and because Verstappen was tanked off after 3 corners. Because I think if if Mercedes had been performing even vaguely and Verstappen was, in the race, I think we'd have been looking at Mercedes.
Manish, can I ask you the obvious question?
Yes.
Where would Verstappen have finished if he'd carried on in the race?
Third. There was nothing touching those McLarens this race. So did you read Christian Horner's sort of, typically pithy sort of, I think the McLarens were kind of making love to each other. The nose of one was right up the exhaust of the other. Now, the point he was trying to make.
I think the point he's trying to make, yeah.
Well, fuck McLaren. It was, I thought the point he was making was...
Finley, at this point, could you please find maybe a photograph that we can't work out whether it was a finger in a shower or something else? Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you very much. So they do seem to have cracked this, follow the car in front of you, and your tyres don't melt. It was a 50-degree track temperature, wasn't it? So there were lots of things that told you this McLaren is just such a fantastic car. When I looked at the Oscar Lando, the sort of pass, then not the pass, or and then it was another pass. Oscar apparently apologised to the team for almost taking Lando out, which I thought was quite amusing. Oh, you don't think he should have done, Raving
Apologising
Chris?
for something he didn't do.
Yes.
I
He
don't get
apologised
that.
for something he didn't do. I mean, it's so clean in that team. It's kind of had mate, I almost took you out, sorry. You know, I love the idea of that. They're so clean.
I know these people operate on a level of accuracy that we can't comprehend, but there was some luck involved there.
I agree.
Once that wheel was locked, he was heading towards an accident, and in 5 times out of 10, that could have ended in both of them being out.
But it didn't.
Which brings us to Mr. Antonelli. You know, I mean, he just shot one up the inside. And remember, I texted fight. I think I texted that on our group chat. I really thought Verstappen was going to lose it, but he was just so...
He was calm, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So calm. A bad season. Antonelli kept his lid on. Max took his off. But...
I don't. By the way, we were sort of exchanging messages as we do during the Grand Prix. I don't view that incident quite the same way. I don't think he tried to fire on at the inside. I think he was totally surprised by how early the car in front of him braked,
Right.
and he decided he realised he had the spatial awareness thing. I've got to move to the right now, and he did. At that point, the back of the car was lost because he had basically put the car into a situation where it couldn't remain in a straight line. So we lost the back of the car. So I don't think he was actually trying to aggressively.
No, he just got it wrong.
That space to overtake. He just basically he had to decide whether he was going to hit the back of the car in front or take the space to his right, which he did.
Well, one of the two of us can drive a racing car, so I'm going with you on that. And just further into I mean, I felt so bad for Williams. They are having the worst run at the moment. Albon, I mean, what does he need? I mean, he's had a couple of chocolates, but yeah, I really thought he was driving fantastically in this race. It was all over the place. Mercedes, for me, again, what happens when it gets hot with that team? I mean, they just, they really, really have a difficult time. The car doesn't stick to the track. And
but Russell was so racy in that first lap. Obviously, he thought, I've got 3 laps when this thing's going to work. I'll give it a lot.
And then it was gone. And then my special mention actually goes, I think you pointed out, Lawson was a great unforgotten drive of this race. He qualified brilliantly. He was racing brilliantly. He actually beat a guy called Hadjar, which everybody saying needs to be in a team with Max Verstappen. But I think now we seen the kind of the total proof about this Red Bull. I think Karun brought it up in the commentary. Lawson didn't survive in that car. Tsunoda is not surviving in that car. No one survives in that car. There is something about the design of that Red Bull. Maybe it is that Alex Albon, it's a mouse with the sensitivity turn up. And people have got to ask themselves, is that a philosophy that you want to go down? Because what if Max does leave? I know it's a very, very small possibility, and I know that Max is getting very,
He's going to leave. He's going to go to Aston Martin.
Every time he's asked that, he gets really pissed off. He's like, "Will you just leave me alone? I'm happy in this team." I'm in Ibiza with a Mr. Eccleston. I said to him today, "What do you think about this Ford engine? Is it going to be brilliant?" He said, "I think it's going to be all right." So I do wonder whether he's going to leave. I do wonder whether he's going to leave. But if he left, that team is going to be, I mean, they would have come last in that Grand Prix. Yeah. That's it. Who can steer that baby better than him? Could you imagine a swap between Russell and Verstappen? Can you actually imagine that swap?
No.
Because that, I think, is the swap that you'd see. What would happen? So that's it. That's all I'm going to say about this race. It was great. McLaren won too, but that's, for me now, that's the exciting bit about this. Is Oscar going to win? I thought it was brilliant that Lando did come back. But, that's the big climate thing. But, in terms of weather, I find this formula, I've said it a billion times, I find it very, very weird. I don't mind unpredictable, but just random is very, very frustrating.
Neil Clifford.
I really, really want Lando to win the World Championship. He's my new Lewis. Maybe I'm over patriotic, aren't I? And I should be.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's great for McLaren as a brand.
Yeah.
Going back to our little chat about McLaren and Luca, and if it wasn't for rich people in the Middle East, McLaren would be in the same shit as Lotus, wouldn't it?
Correct.
So we really hope that the magic formula rubs off onto the road cars, and I think McLaren and Lando or Oscar, doesn't really matter, does it? Would be bloody fabulous. I quite enjoyed the race. I fell asleep a little bit in the middle,
Yeah, I had a little
but
sunbathe.
it's a really good. I don't know whether it's the noise or it's the sort of Sunday afternoon feeling. It's a perfect little nappy time, the Formula One, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Normally,
that was nice.
normally when they've got their first pit stop out of the way, you're like, oh, I'll go for a
Yeah,
piss.
my eyes are always going even on the warm up lap, and I'm like, I've got to see the start because someone's going to ask me about the bloody race. I've got to at least watch the start and the end, and then my wife can tell me what happened in the middle. But it was half decent, wasn't it? You wish there was a bit more overtaking in this bloody thing, really.
You clearly didn't watch much of it. There was loads of overtaking.
I was there, okay.
It
No, I was asleep.
Chris Cooper.
The McLaren's thing is witchcraft, isn't it? When you talk to people in the know, in the industry, and say those cars were going hammer and tongs, they were fighting, they were right on the edge of braking and odd lines and squirming around a bit, and they're still pissing away by a second a lap. It's witchcraft. You can sort of see why Horner and one or two others thought, are they doing everything strictly legally? Because that looks like witchcraft to us. We've got clever people too, and we can't get anywhere near it. Are they being?
They were in that position for several years. So one lap argument. Yeah.
So the McLarens are witchcraft. Mercedes. I mean, clearly, 3-4 years into this formula, their ability to get a car to work in hot temperatures is clearly limited. I've said this before, I've thought for a long time that Toto's enthusiasm and love for George is well under control. And that if Max turned up and said, you know what, you're on, then interestingly, a few months ago, I think it would have been a no-brainer. It would have been, well, Kimi Antonelli, he's our promised child. Lewis was before my time, missed out on Max. Kimi's the next one. He's our chosen one. So it's Kimi and Max. Now, actually, I'm not so sure that's what they all think. Kimi's clearly got a lot of talent, and he had a similar amount of testing to Lewis. And by the Canadian Grand Prix in Lewis's first year, in fact, right from the word go, Lewis was on Alonso. It doesn't feel like Kimi was half a second off George in quali in a very short lap. You'd have to say Bortoleto, who I thought, I've said at the beginning of the season, Bortoleto is the guy because he's done something that only Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri and George had done, which is win Formula 3 and Formula 2 and then go to Formula 1 in 3 seasons. Kimi didn't do that. Bortoleto
I think Kimi was named after Kimi. Was he named after the old Kimi?
Yeah,
named after
his name is Andrea Antonelli, but his dad was a big Kimi fan. His dad and Toto are like that. So who knows?
Toto's so cool.
Yeah,
he's cool. Toto. That's another subject.
I think he's genuinely in a quandary. And the Aston Martin thing is a moving feast. Who will be there? Is the Adrian Newey? They're going to have a Mercedes engine, which everyone says is going to be the best. They've got Adrian Newey. They're throwing a lot of money at it. Lawrence Stroll is not.
Aston are going to have a Honda engine. Sorry. They're the Honda team.
The Honda thing. Yeah. People are keeping quiet. Lawrence is keeping quiet. He's not being bombastic. So that sort of thinks he's getting serious. So, let's face it. It's going to be Lando or Oscar this year. Take your pick. I still think Oscar will get it because I just think Lando will just make more mistakes or be Lando-y at some point, like he was at Canada. And you just think Oscar is so possibly without quite the highest highs. If I had to bet now, I still think Oscar would get it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
I think I think on what I saw at the weekend, I think Lando's still in with a shout.
Oh, definitely.
Because as in I'd put my money on him because one of the great things about this sport is that it rewards just being the fastest. And, Lando's margin of pole position was the largest of the season on the shortest track. So he's when he needs to, he can go really, really very fast. He can actually go faster than Oscar. So Oscar, I think, probably Oscar has the better temperament. If you were the team manager, you want a bit more Oscar than you would Lando. But he was pretty dominant. And also, Oscar put him under, I'm not sure you get more pressure. That's your teammate, your young teammate, who's made you look a bit of a mug for the last couple of months. And you turn up there, he only made one or two whoopsies, but he managed to cover them off. So, this was a very interesting race because to start with, I was like, I want to have words with the person that's directing the television footage here because it's all like we're missing stuff out. But then it's either someone tapped them on the shoulder sort of a quarter of the way through, because then they really started to find a nice balance between keeping us informed of what's going on at the front, but then finding all the good dust-ups that were going on down the grid. And there were lots of really good dust-ups. And some outrageous car control and skills on display. I mean, those last two corners, if you've ever been there, they look pretty severe on telly, but that last right-hander is a massive scoop when you come down it, and it sort of spits you out onto the back straight, and you never seem to get it right. And how they use so much curb. I mean, I was in softly sprung road cars, I couldn't use the curbs they did. So it shows you the suspension on these cars is phenomenal. So I thought a couple of points that we haven't discussed. The Ferraris were just invisible in the race. So we've just watched this Formula One movie. Everyone's talking about the Formula One movie. By the way, it's a Formula One movie. And suddenly, Ferrari, its biggest team, isn't really figuring on any of the race coverage. You'd almost not know there were Ferraris in the race. There was very little radio chat from Lewis, apart from his, why was he brought in? He could have carried on going. Leclerc did his thing, and he was pretty quiet. I thought it's interesting. There's a solidarity amongst the teams that they own the sport that they love. But there was sort of a bit of body language around the Williams fuck up at the beginning that was like, come on, lads. Come on, we're putting on a show here. What's going on? It was a bit like, we've all got that mate. When you go out on the piss, there were 10 of you. Like, there's the one that's always, he's going to piss down his leg when he's had 8 pints. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
So I thought there was a bit of that. I felt very sorry for them. I'm sure, they're a brilliant bunch. And I love it when Williams win. But that was just we all have bad weekends. For God's sake, I presented Top Gear. I know how bad it can get. And also, I do believe that either there's a link between the title sponsor of Formula One at the moment, Audi, and the fact that the stake F1 team seems to be getting quite a lot of coverage at the moment. So Jonathan Wheatley, who's a big fan of this podcast, bloody done, because your drivers are performing well. But in terms of airtime, if I hadn't seen this sport before the Formula One film was released, I would think that stake F1 was a bigger team than Ferrari at the moment, given the television footage. It was all over it. Quite brilliant. And both drivers performing when he needs them to. And I agree with Manish. I have to say I wasn't a big fan of some of the things Lawson did or said, or the way he handled himself last year or the beginning of this year. And it wasn't Schadenfreude, but there was a sense, be careful what you wish for, son. But my God.
Bernie was there, was he?
Yeah.
Bernie put the medal around Lando's neck.
That was a random interjection. Lovely. I just thought that Lawson was all over the timesheets in quali. He was all over the timesheets in the race. But it's like the commentators have been told, "Don't talk about Lawson."
Yeah,
it's like he was almost invisible.
It was bizarre.
Yeah, and he stuck one on Hajar as well, who is without a doubt the talk of the paddock these days. So topsy turvy race. I really enjoyed it, and I know it was a foregone conclusion whether it was going to be McLaren, but there was lots going on, and I also. This sounds terribly elitist. It really helps if you've driven a circuit yourself, because then you look at corners and go, "What the hell are they doing there?"
Yes,
that sort of fast S, and it's a shot where they come down the hill and it goes right, and there's a left-right sort of quick chicaney thing. I can't understand what they do through there. I cannot get my head around it. And that's where Lando had the biggest balls. His car was visibly using more of the track and taking more risks on every lap. Right.
Very good.
Moving on. So we have a 2-car garage. This is quite a long one. Sorry, boys and girls. 2-car garage. We'll get through these quickly. You run a small tech support company and were a huge Ferrari fan back in the Luca days. Don't know why you came up with this, Manish. Recently, you've been going through your vast swathes of personal data and discovered that you spent $1 in 2011 something called Bitcoin. It's now worth £250,000. Buy 2 Luca Ferraris from our title sponsors for this particular segment of the podcast, Car and Classic, and grin all the way to your local Shell garage. Get on the Car and Classic app now and waste an hour of your time, because you will. It is catnip. Right. I'm going to start. Get me out of the way. Then I won't have to talk for a bit. So, 2 cars. Luca era. I was going to be a bit arch and bring in a Maserati, because I think the Quattroporte GTS 4.7, as far as I'm concerned, Maserati and Ferrari were the same company then. It's a great car. There's one for sale. It's not an auction, but it's overseas and it's done a few miles, but it's still 49,000 euros. But there we go. I'm going to go for, there's an auction for I think it's called Grigio Alloy. It's a 360 Spider. Right, and the reason I'm choosing that, it's not an obvious Luca era car, but it's the first Ferrari that I had to, and I say this carefully, I didn't slide it on a road. I corrected a slide on the road, and there happened to be an autocar photographer there to capture it.
These things happen.
I know, to put it in the magazine.
These things happen.
And it was that colour, and I remember Steve Sutcliffe being on the side of the road, sort of fist pumping, going, "Yes, well done, son." And I've still got the photo. I keep it as my first Ferrari slide in autocar photo. So I have one of those because it brings back so many memories. And that was the car also that I tried to make a fake Enzo out of, and then lure Auto Express in to try and get them to pay money for the spy shots. That was the car that I've added all the cardboard to. And when I pulled the gaffer tape off the spoiler, all the paint came off. Sorry, Ferrari. So I wasn't going to go for 55 grand, isn't it? Probably is what it is. The owner will want 90, but it's not happening. So I think after that, I'm not going to use all my budget. For me, a Luca Ferrari probably has to be a car I've spoken to him about, because I'm lucky enough to have done that, and a car that he owns. He owns 2 Ferraris.
Ooh.
One of which is worth a lot more than the budget for this. The other one is an FF. So he has an FF, not on this continent. And I believe it's white, or Bianco Avis, or something, whatever it would be called. Bianco Bolivian, or whatever you might call it. So I think, but there's one for sale, and I'll put the link up now. It's not the most expensive one, but it's a dark silver metallic colour on current.
Oh, you bastard.
But it's got the bloody cocoa, it's got the chocolate leather. And I've looked through 5 of them, and whenever I see one of those, God, I miss mine. One day I'm going to have another FF. I think they're just the most glorious cars. So those are my 2 cars. I'm going to go to Manish quickly.
Oh my gosh! So you guys have totally converted me to the FF. I've gone from just going, "What is that car about?" I actually sat in the very first one delivered to Abu Dhabi. It was pearl white, blue leather inside, absolutely. The aesthetics didn't do anything for me until I sat in it. But I think I found the same FF as you. It's beautiful. Is it the one that's £105,000?
It might be Northern Ireland.
Okay, no. So mine's grey with black charcoal, 32,000 miles,
Okay.
2015. It's so pretty.
Brilliant car.
Absolutely a convert to the FF. And then I've gone for the first true Luca car. There's a stunning 355 GTS manual with just 35,000 miles on the clock. It's £125,000. It's expensive, but it's beautiful. So we've got the beginning
I
of
think,
Luca.
by the way, with my nerd hat on, the first true Luca Ferrari is
360.
the 512 TR.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Because Mr. Chiocci, I think it was, who told me about his first job under Luca was to basically fix the Testarossa. and that came from Luca. So I think the 512 TR
When did
is
it come out? The 512 TR?
92,
Early 92.
late 92.
So, but then that means the 456 was the first true Luca car because it came out in July 92.
I'm going to go back to my books now. Well,
Have a quick look. I haven't
Chris Cooper.
2 Luca era Ferraris for a 2-car garage. There can only be one answer: a Ferrari FF, and a 458 Spider. That's a photograph I took at the 2011 Frankfurt Motor Show.
We love that.
I was on the stand. So there's one at about 105 on the Car and Classic website, which is actually similar to that one. And there's a 458 Spider for about 130, so just under the 250. So I think
nice.
If you have the money and the resources, go to that website, and those are 2 Luca era Ferraris that are just wonderful.
Neil Clifford.
I couldn't disagree with any of that, Mr. Cooper. And honestly, that's the best. That's the best too. But as I was browsing the Car and Classic app, the itch I've never itched completely is the 575 manual.
Yeah, nice.
I think it's a
great one on here, isn't it?
And obviously 552, but there's that sort of the 575 thing. It's a little bit better.
I never quite got it.
I've never driven one, so I don't know whether it is better than 550. I like the bigger tacho.
Yeah.
The dash is quite that big tacho. It's a dinner plate. It's fucking great. And all of I live my truths through the journalists of the time, and they said it was always just a little bit better in every area, but maybe not. So I'd have a 575. There's a blue one, and there's a grey one. I think I'd go for the blue one because then I think the true first Luca car, and I mean not the fact that he's bodged together an improved one like a 355 or a 512. The first real Luca car was the 360, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think you can argue that.
Yeah,
new platform
from scratch, the 360. And I
actually no, 550.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably you look at it that way, yeah.
I'm doing both then. I'm doing the 2 first real Luca cars, going 550. There's a lovely Tour de France blue one, and then you'd get a matching 360. So you'd have 2 manuals, V8, V12, both Tour de France blue. They're both on the app.
Yeah.
This is sacrilege. I'm going to get shouted down in the comments. I think the 360 is a better looking car than the 355.
Ooh, that's a bold statement.
That's a bold statement. And I'm not trying to be sort of controversial anyway. I really like the 360. I like it a lot. And it's a better car. It's a bit like saying 997's, 997's better than 996, 991's better than 996. It's the same shit. It's a better car, isn't it?
Yeah.
Foz is about to be upon us. Festival of Speed, Goodwood. K&N will be there, okay? So make sure you go and visit K&N. We have very few more tips to offer you on how to visit Goodwood, but we do urge you to go. I think most tickets are now sold out, but it's the de facto British motor show. Go and find the K&N chaps. Go and say that you listen to the podcast. Go and find out what whizzo things they make for your car to go a bit faster and sound a bit better. Because I tell you, you'll be quite surprised at the kit they make. It's not all about Vauxhall Astras and Minis. It's much more than that. Also, we have a little treat coming for you. At our track day, we did record a film where I attempted to, what's the word? Instruct is not the word. I attempted to try and make Neil listen to me as he drove around Thruxton.
Oh,
really
God.
That video is coming up soon in the very ratty but beautifully air-befiltered K&N 330 Ci track car that cost £4,000. So I want to say a big thank you to K&N for coming on board. We've loved cocking about with their stuff, and I have to say the video is lots of fun. So we will look forward to doing more with you in the future, hopefully. Now, yes, housekeeping. Two obituaries that I read this week that are pertinent to people that listen to this podcast. The first is Lalo Schifrin, who is my favourite film score writer of all time. I know there are others that are great, but I think, and my choice for music has to be the Harry. You have to listen to the Dirty Harry, the first score, today or tomorrow in the car. It is absolutely exceptional. Without that, the film would be half the film. So Lalo Schifrin, R.I.P. The other one. Now this came up in my Instagram. How sad is this? Rick Hurst. Rick Hurst was an actor who played Cletus Hogg in the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh my
Yes,
God.
Boss Hogg.
Cletus.
No, Cletus. He was Cletus.
The deputy.
Who had let's not forget that the people that wrote the Dukes of Hazzard had very, very good senses of humour, because there were two characters called Cletus and Enos. Now, I don't know how much they were chuckling at the writers' table when they wrote those, but this was the awkwardly named and not to be attempted when inebriated Cletus Hogg. Anyhow, R.I.P. Cletus, because that was my favourite TV show when I was a kid. So moving on, manage some music.
When we first made Lucky, the piece of music we wanted to use to use as the starting music was "Sympathy for the Devil" by the Rolling Stones. I've picked it before in this pod, but I'm back in Ibiza. It was the first time I've had a proper chat with Bernie in almost 20 months, and I have been reliving a few memories. So my piece of music, the moment I get into Lola, when I get back to England on Wednesday, will be "Sympathy for the Devil."
Great song. Great song.
Or it'll be the dialing tone for the AA.
There,
Neil
I've made the second fob work. You're an
engineer
have.
now.
Sorry, I lost you there. Did you say testicle or fob?
Boom.
Neil Clifford.
I went to see Public Enemy at the Royal Albert Hall on Friday to relive my 80s youth of Portsmouth nightclubs called Images, and walking into that club on a Friday night, and always seemed to be the first track was Rebel Without a Pause, Public Enemy, and they played it and it was magic. And I took my Portsmouth mates, we went out for a curry, and it was life doesn't get much better than that. It's good.
Chris Cooper.
So we talked about Luca going to McLaren and the enormity of that and how spectacular that is after all of his time at Ferrari and the signal he was sending to Elkan and so forth. So this week, it can only be Bobby Darin and Mac the Knife.
Oh, no. Very good.
Very good. Right. Thank you for staying with us. Me, completely congested after sitting in a very cold hotel room. I do apologise. Got worse and worse as it went on. Manish in Ibiza, Chris at his desk, Neil in his garden. Thank you very much. We will look forward to boring you again with episode number 40